In the first 50 lines of the Aeneid, we are focused not on Aeneas, our titular hero, but on Juno, queen of the gods and agent of rage. In the last section, we focused on her rage, with Virgil even going so far as to have her first utterance be rage, only in Greek. And we also saw her indignation as she complained about the favorable treatment of Minerva, how she was able to stir up a storm, how she was able to kill a whole lot of Greeks for what just one man, Lesser Ajax, did, and how she herself is powerless despite her powerful station on Olympus. Now our attention will shift to Aeolus, the king of the winds and the floating island of Aeolia. This island does feature in Homer's Odyssey, but in context not with the storm. Odysseus received a bag of winds from Aeolus, all but the west wind, the Zephyrus, which would help him sail east to Ithaca. But as they are about to arrive there, just miles offshore, Odysseus's men let curiosity get the better of them, and they open up the bag, releasing the other winds and driving them to unknown seas. In lines 50 to 63, Virgil gives us his own background of Aeolus and his control over the winds. This is a very picturesque description, relying on sound and structure to convey some of the meaning. We begin with our verbal punctuation. Remember, ancient epic uses words to illustrate what punctuation does today. Don't let the word order confuse you in line 50. Flammato modifies corde. It's an ablative of location. And Dea, our goddess Juno, is being modified with the present participle volutans. Its direct object is talia. And just like with the hike in line 37, which began the quote, this is a substantive adjective, translated as such things or such words. And finally, secum, like it did in line 37, means to herself rather than with herself. The main verb for this line comes in line 52, wenet. If we scan this line, by the way, we find out that the E in wenet is short, which means it's present tense. Wenet with a long E is perfect, came, while wenet with a short E is present tense, comes. Sometimes my own students mistake patria, fatherland, in line 51, with the word it derives from pater, father. So don't make the same mistake. The patriam nimborum is further described by the appositive phrase loca fata forentibus austris, the fatherland of clouds, a place. Loca is plural, but most editors suggest to translate it singularly. Teeming with the raging winds. The auster is the south wind that blows from the south. Think of Australia, which derives from this word. But austris here is being used for the winds in general, especially the raging storm winds. In our next sentence, hic is an adverb, meaning here, referring to Aeolia. The rest of the line is in chiastic order, a BBA, with wasto modifying antro, an ablative of location, and rex describes Aeolus. This is pretty cool, though, because our king Aeolus is literally in a huge cave. It's awesome when a chiasmus actually reinforces meaning, and this idea about the people in the cave actually being in the between the words referring to the cave comes back in book 4, so keep it in the back of your mind. I love the sound of line 53. Luctantes ventos tempestatesque sonoras. 4 spondies at the beginning of the line, and your tongue is straining like the winds and storms. Finishing off this thought, these 3 are ablatives of means, and vinclis et carcere, with chains in a prison, is a pretty famous example of a hendiadys, using 2 nouns to convey the thought of one single concept. So R.D. Williams, one of the great commentators of the Aeneid, translates this as within the confines of their cell, rather than just with chains and a prison. And Freinat points ahead to a metaphor of Aeolus, controlling the winds like a charioteer would control his chariot and horses. The noun freinum, which gives us this verb here, is a bridle that you use on a horse. And on the racetrack, the carcer was the starting blocks, the prison where racing teams were kept before the race. Illi, in line 55, refers to the winds, and indignantes describes the winds. They are confined, and they don't like it or think that they deserve it. Magno cum murmure montis is a fantastic alliterative phrase, the murmuring of the mountain being reinforced with the repeated sounds. The placement of the word Aeolus in line 56 recalls 52, especially if you include the ablative of location. The adjective and noun are in the same place, but only the verb is different. The rest of this, though, is pretty straightforward. A present participle and its object, followed by a verb and its object, then another verb and its object. Oh hey, another reference to rage. Aeolus is supposed to be a controller of rage. In many ways, his normal job is one of order, and Juno comes in and subverts that order with her own form of chaos. What follows tells us what would happen if Aeolus does not control the rage of the winds. Would happen, though, which is why Virgil uses the present subjunctives faciat and ferant and verant. This is a future less vivid condition, and you can translate faciat as should do or were to do, keeping in mind that ni, short for nisi, means if not. Quippe is ironic, just like it was in line 39, and the objects of ferant here effectively represent the entire world, the seas, lands, and sky. The world will come to an end if Aeolus doesn't do his job. But he is, so, Finally, secum is with them, referring to the winds, not to themselves, like we've seen secum used before. This last bit begins with pater omnipotens. This is Jupiter, and this adjective is commonly used for Jupiter in Virgil and earlier poets, and even occurs in Greek in Homer about Zeus, Jupiter's Greek equivalent. He is effectively all-powerful, except he too is bounded by the fates. Spelunkis atris is an ablative of location, and the Hulk metuanes recalls Juno's id metuanes in line 23, where she too is trying to prevent ruin. The Hulk refers to the destruction of the world, described in lines 58 and 59. Molem et montes are literally a mass and mountains, but this is another famous Hendiadys, where two nouns are used to describe one concept, more figuratively, massive mountains. Jupiter is the subject of these three verbs here, which means the regem has to be Aeolus, and the qui clause that follows further describes regem. But sciret is subjunctive, so this is a relative clause of characteristic. This king would be the sort of man who would, or who would have the characteristic. Sciret is commonly used in Latin with the sense of know how to, when it is followed by an infinitive as it is here, with premere and dare. Two more things. Dare laxas habenas is literally to give loosened reins, which is equivalent to just to loosen the reins. The opposite of premere, which is to restrain the reins. And finally, iussus is a nominative singular perfect participle. So it describes Aeolus, when ordered by Jupiter. This reaffirms the chariot racing metaphor from line 54. But if Aeolus is the charioteer, he can sometimes let his horses, the winds, get out of control. So in these lines, we have a description of the power Aeolus has been given over the winds, and power or control, sphere of influence, is a dominant theme in Book 1. Aeolus controls the winds. We saw this with words like impereo in 54, the scepter in 57, how Aeolus soothes passions and calms wraths like a ruler does, and continual reference of Aeolus as rex. But Aeolus does not control the sea. So when a storm arises, Neptune naturally gets upset, and the natural world order is overturned. Later, in Book 1, we see the command Dido has over her city and people. Jupiter is omnipotent and has command over everyone, including Aeolus, even if he is restricted by the fates, just like everyone else. So, in our next bit, we hear Juno's attempt to persuade Aeolus in his response. But remember, Jupiter, not Juno, gave him his power, and only Jupiter should be able to command Aeolus to unleash the winds.